I've only ever seen this movie once in my whole life, and pretty much since forgot about it. Mind you, I was only in the 4th or 5th grade, so I didn't really have a stance on cinema. The Wizard of Oz wouldn't catch my attention again until I was scrolling through TikTok. Stories about how the actors would suffer lifelong injuries and illness, the unfair treatment and unreasonable pay, and just how much this film has affected Judy Garland, who passed away on June 22nd, 1969. Today I'm going to speak about this topic and hopefully shed more light on this horrible Hollywood story. The Wizard of Oz was bought by MGM Studios and wanted to compete with Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The project took a while to get started, especially with casting. A little fun fact, the role of Dorothy was originally going to go to Shirley Temple. And if you know anything about Shirley Temple's career, it's kind of disturbing. Now, the reason why Shirley Temple wasn't picked for the role of Dorothy is because casting directors didn't like her vocal range. Even though Shirley was a good singer, she wasn't quite what they were looking for. And at the time, Shirley Temple was working with 20th Century Fox, and they didn't want to share her talents with other companies. But it wouldn't be long for MGM Studios to find their number one Dorothy, which would be Judy Garland. The first few instructions that were given to Judy prior to filming was for Judy to lose 12 pounds. It also wouldn't be much help for the studio executives to keep calling Judy a fat pig with pigtails. Perhaps to the studio executives it was just a motivation plot to get her to lose the weight. Or perhaps it was just grown men making fun of a poor girl. Just 2 weeks into filming, Tin Man actor Buddy Epstein got terribly sick when the aluminum face powder got into his system. As we all know, aluminum is really toxic when around the skin and around the eyes, nose, and mouth. Years later in an interview, Epstein mentioned this scenario. I woke up in bed screaming from violent cramping in my hands, arms, and legs. When Epstein's wife noticed this, she immediately called 911 and had him rushed to the hospital. Epstein had to be put on an oxygen tank for 2 weeks because there were in fact aluminum in his lungs. After the recasting of Tin Man, now being played by Jack Haley, another problem arose. A problem that would affect the entire cast even years later. The makeup they all had to wear for 16 hours a day proved to be deadly, especially for Jack Haley. Instead of aluminum powder, the studio had Jack wear aluminum paste. In their eyes, it was a much safer alternative because it was less likely for Jack to ingest it. But the paste still proved risky when it gave Jack an eye infection. But this would be treated soon, so the film couldn't be delayed any longer. Now, Judy Garland was only 17 years old when filming The Wizard of Oz, which is well into puberty stages. But the studio wanted her child-friendly image to continue and didn't want her body to be distracted by the audience. So the studio made a choice for her and decided for her breasts to be taped down and for her to wear a girdle to be more slim, despite her already losing 12 pounds for the role. She was also given diet pills and was fed very little food, but those studio executives weren't done with her yet. The studio gave Garland tight and very heavy costumes to wear. This would be difficult for her because she needed to dance in some scenes. The pills, on the other hand, wouldn't stop for Judy, even years after The Wizard of Oz. The more roles she would book in the future, the more studios would be obsessed with her childlike figure. Judy would later describe her body-controlling experience in her autobiography, saying, I remember this very vividly more than anything else in my childhood. One day on set, Judy Garland would be physically assaulted by the director of the film, Victor Fleming. It was during a scene where Judy was supposed to slap the Cowardly Lion, but Judy just wouldn't stop laughing. Victor Fleming took Judy backstage and gave her a swift slap across the face. After returning to set, Judy completed the scene without even cracking a smile. Burt Lahr, the actor who played the Cowardly Lion, had his fair share of danger on set too. You see, the costume that Burt had to wear was actually made of lion hide and weighed over 90 pounds. There wasn't much ventilation, and those stage lights weren't doing Burt any favors. This left Burt sweating so much that the costume department had to take his costume, wash it and dry it every night so it could be ready for Burt in the morning, only to have the costume be drenched in sweat once again. Also, Burt's makeup was time-consuming, so the director made a request for him to not eat solid food and to just stick with soups. At first, Burt was okay with this, but after eating soup for 16 hours every day, he demanded that he eat regular food again. Now, wearing body prosthetics in films weren't like how they are today, but in Ray Bolger's case, who plays Scarecrow, He had to go through an extensive after effect when it came to wearing his facial prosthetics, where if you can see in this photo, Ray has 2 indents that are around his mouth. As a result of wearing poorly fitted prosthetics, Ray had to deal with those indents for a whole year before they started to fade. Now let's talk about the Margaret Hamilton incident. During the scene where the Wicked Witch of the West had to make a smoky red exit, the special effects crew had a fire issue when turning on the smoke, and just like that, Margaret's broom caught fire and soon along with herself. Margaret would put out a statement detailing where the flames have touched her, saying, "Scalding my chin, the right side of my cheek, bridge of my nose, and right side of my forehead." Not to mention that her eyelashes were completely burnt off, and her right eyelid had some damage too. The back of her hand would also have some first-degree burns too. Even after all of what happened to Margaret, the studio still didn't offer her any treatment, not even a ride home. It was reported that a friend of hers had to come on set and pick her up. It took approximately 6 weeks for her to return back to set, but even with that amount of time, her hand still wasn't fully healed. Margaret wanted to sue MGM Studios, but didn't for fear that she might not book another role. In fact, the only thing the studio ever did for Margaret was give her $35 US, which today would be $630. Another thing that needs to be mentioned is the amount of asbestos that was being used. Asbestos is really dangerous because it causes lung cancer, as well as cancer of the digestive system and colon cancer. The asbestos was used for the witch's broom, the entire costume of the scarecrow, and the dust that was poured onto Dorothy when waking her up. Now, because this was the 1930s, it was the era of the Great Depression, so money was very scarce when it came to paying actors decent wages. Judy Garland was reported to be paid $500 per week, which today would be $9,000. But let's compare Judy's pay with Jack Haley and Roy Bulger's pay. Jack and Ray were actually the highest paid actors on this film. Each would bring home $9,000, which today would be $54,000. Terry the dog, who played Toto, got paid $125, which today would be $2,000. And shockingly, that's actually more money than what the actors who played the Munchkins got. Those poor actors only received $50, which is $900 today. And to add more insult to injury, the actors who played the Munchkins didn't even get their names in the rolling credits. Besides Judy Garland, those actors playing the Munchkins got the worst treatment. When Judy Garland passed away in June 22nd, 1969, her ex-husband wrote an unfinished memoir. The memoir reportedly had details of some of the actors playing the Munchkins putting their hands up Judy's dress. The alleged words are as followed. "They made Judy's life miserable by putting their hands up her dress." Although these allegations have never been proven. In 2018, the last remaining actor who played a Munchkin said in an interview that on the last day of film, Judy Garland gave all 100 actors a signed photo and a box of chocolates. Then went on to say, "She was a movie star, so I thought she'd be a pain in the neck, but we were glad to see her and she was glad to see us." But the alleged behavior of all the Munchkins were so out of control that it was the only thing being talked about outside of set. Even going so far as becoming a rumor that one Munchkin unalived himself on set. In this screenshot, you can see Dorothy, Tin Man, and Scarecrow walking along the yellow brick road. But what could be seen in the woods is something that looks like a silhouette of a person hanging on a tree. This would be later debunked, as it was said that some of the executives brought on animals, more specifically birds, and this is just one trying to fly away. The Wizard of Oz finally released in theaters on August 25th, 1939. But remember, this is still the Great Depression, so not a lot of families were trying to go out into theaters and spending their money just to watch a fantasy movie. And things would get worse for the film when not that much time later, Gone with the Wind would release. The Wizard of Oz would win Best Original Score and Best Original Song at the Academy Awards, but was ultimately known to be a huge failure. That is, of course, until CBS aired the film on November 3rd, 1956. Today, The Wizard of Oz is considered to be one of the greatest films of all time, even picking up the spot to be an all-American classic. But no matter how much positivity the film gets, it will never escape its harsh and grim reality of what happened behind the scenes. Judy Garland's childhood was tainted by old Hollywood, but it still wasn't enough to silence her beautiful voice. One thing is for sure, despite the bad treatment she received on the set of Oz, A star was definitely born that day.